Hey everybody, this is Izzy here coming to you with another review. Welcome to my cinema library. I am your host Izzy. I am your Sumter film critic. And today's review is going to be focused around another sequel. And it is a sequel of Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, the sequel to Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. To give you a little bit of a backstory, Arnold Schwarzenegger at this particular time, I don't believe he had went into the role of the governorship yet. But he decided to tap into the Terminator mythology well again. And needless to say, there was quite a bit of hesitation amongst fans and even critics who felt that the series came to a satisfactory conclusion with Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which is quite understandable because those two films, Terminator and Terminator 2, are literally two of the greatest films to have ever been made in cinematic history. So for him to tap into the well again, people were thinking, well, where else can you go after two monumentally influential films such as the first two? And I will admit I was a little bit apprehensive. At the same time, there was this level of anticipation because the Terminator films are, and the mythology is so exponentially great and rich that you could pretty much take it into any direction and have it tie in to whatever concept that the director is attempting to convey. The only problem with this particular film in this aspect is the only one who was returning was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you didn't have Edward Furlong as John Connor. You don't have Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. You have Claire Danes coming in as Kate Brewster, and you have the new villain, the TX, played by the ever so beautiful Christina Loken. With James Cameron not being involved as far as the directorial and writing procedure is concerned, you could definitely feel that there was something missing within this Terminator element. It's not to say that it's not a bad film. In fact, I think appreciation has grown exponentially great after the likes of Genesis, Salvation, even Dark Fate, which, again, as I said, when you have two great films as Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, anything that comes afterwards is going to fail in comparison because the expectations are completely unrealistic. You simply cannot, you're not going to be able to generate that same quality magic that James Cameron managed to tap into with those films. Basically, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is a story about John Connor who is off the grid and Skynet is not able to find him. Of course, this is way, way before the technological advances that we have now, considering this was released in 2003, so the internet was a powerful tool, but at the same time, it wasn't to the degree that it's at now, along with social media. So Skynet sends a new Terminator in the form of a TX that's a combination of the T-1000 and T-800, T-850 models, and is seeking to eliminate any potential threats that is perceived to join the Resistance. The Resistance sends a new Terminator, T-850, and once again played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, to thwart the plans of Skynet and the TX. Needless to say, from the beginning of the film, you could definitely tell it's a lot different compared to the previous films, simply because of the fact that its ventures. The thing that I particularly didn't care too much about in this film is how it ventured more into the realms of comedy. It had the right idea, actually. I really do appreciate the fact that it was more interested about telling a story about the machines rising, even though the perceived statement in the film that there was no fate for what we make for ourselves, and at the end of the second film, which as we know, the idea, if you will, was that Skynet is completely eradicated. John Connor and Sarah Connor eventually went on to live their life, for as far as we know, depending on what ending that you perceive. They proceed to live their life as more along the lines of living with a sense of hope, and that Skynet never came to fruition. There was no nuclear holocaust. Whereas this one, they completely negate that and said, okay, yes, you prevented Skynet from coming online, but at the same time, you didn't in any way, shape, or form keep it from happening. It's still going to happen, regardless of whatever it is that you managed to do in your previous life. It's still going to happen. So your fate is still sealed. That was an interesting direction that I thought at the first time I saw it, I was like, well, I don't particularly care for it, but at the same time, it does make sense. Because I was one of the ones who really wanted to see a proper future war Terminator film. But before, now that's another story for another review. With this film in particular, obviously it was very different because again, you don't have James Cameron, and the only one who's returning is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the tone is a lot more Jonathan Mostow, with him being the director of this film. You could definitely tell the stylistic differences between him and James Cameron, and also the fact that CGI was starting to become more prominent in the cinematic world, and so we had the Terminator models that are completely CGI compared to the practical effects of the animatronic models, along with the less uses of makeup with Arnold Schwarzenegger with the T-850 being a battle-torn, battle-ready machine. With that being said, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is a decent quality, entertaining film if you are able to separate your expectations from the previous two rather than simply expecting it to be that much more or on par or better than those, because it's never going to happen. I think if you just completely negate those two and pretend that they don't exist and just look at it and say, okay, you know what, maybe we could view this as the beginning of Skynet coming to fruition, then perhaps maybe there would be depreciation level would be that much more on a level of higher appreciation rather than simply, well, man, this is just, how can we get behind this concept? The Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance is still very much in line with what we've come to expect as him being a Terminator. It's a lot more comedic, he's a lot more talkative, and he's more in terms of, I don't want to say emotionally attached, but you are finding him a lot more likable and lovable compared to the previous two, where it's just, he has a particular mission, he didn't talk much, and it was more about him learning, whereas in this one, he has already, since he's an advanced / obsolete model, he has a lot more character interactions with John Connor and Kate Brewster. Dick Stahl is replacing Edward Furlong as John Connor, and he does an exceptional job. But it's kind of you find yourself saying, man, how does John Connor transform from Edward Furlong to Nick Stahl? Again, this type of characterization is a lot different compared to how he was in the second film, whereas he's attempted to hide from his destiny rather than embrace it. Claire Danes is a talented actress, and she does a very good job as Kate Brewster, who eventually becomes the wife of John Connor. It's hard to necessarily find yourself, how can I explain this without sounding so condescending or insulting to them? It's very hard to initially get behind new characters that are played, that familiar characters, well, her being a new character, but it's hard to get behind familiar storylines when you have new actors portraying either that same character or a different type of character that is more or less tied in with that same universe without feeling some sense of attachment to the previous actors or actresses involved. This is the case with Terminator 3. It's so stylistically and cinematically different that it's very hard to process the initial element of embracing this storyline, which I was able to do it after many viewings simply because I love the Terminator mythology. But Terminator 3 is a very entertaining film. It's just one of those type of films where you have to put yourself in the mindset and understand that while it is tied to the same universe, it's still more or less kind of its own story, if you will. The action is still remarkable. I mean, that's one of the things that you could always expect from a Terminator film, is that there is amazing action sequences. And Christina Loken, very beautiful, and a very beautiful woman, and quite sexy in this role, I might add. She does a very good job at portraying a very ruthless, methodical, organized killing machine. And that's the problem. And I'm going to make this interesting comparison, so please bear with me. With Arnold Schwarzenegger in the first Terminator and Robert Patrick in Terminator 2, they exuded a sense of true intimidation where you knew that whenever they appeared on the screen, you knew that something sinister was about to go down, that there was going to be no escape. With the TX played by Christina Loken, it reminded me of, if anyone who is familiar with the James Bond film GoldenEye with Pierce Brosnan, Famke Janssen, and even Alan Cummings, you look at it and how Famke's character, the villainess Xena Onatopp, would kill her victims, wrapping her legs around them, engaged in a sexual act, you think it, well, that's not too much of a bad way to go. It's the same with the TX model. She's killing people, but she's so beautiful and sexy with her role that you're like, man, that's really not a bad way to go, being killed by her. But hey, she does a great job. I mean, and at the time, people were expecting her to reach a level of superstardom just because of how attractive she is and how great she performed this role. But she didn't really, nothing against her, she really didn't reach that level that they were expecting her to, and probably because she didn't feel like she needed to, especially after the success of this film. But either way, Terminator 3 did a pretty exceptional job in continuing the storyline and also attempted to branch it out into new territory. It's fun. It's still an exciting film, and I think, as I said, there's a much greater appreciation for it, considering what came afterwards and how there was so much potential. Considering how this film ended, it was so much potential that actually, if they had just followed through with it, chances are there would have been much more greater success with new and prominent storylines rather than simply trying to revert back to what people were familiar with, which is understandable. However, I just think the embrace would be far more greater if they just did a proper future war Terminator film. But I still enjoy Terminator 3 for what it is. I recognize that it's never going to reach the levels that the first two films did, but it still manages to incorporate enough fun and excitement and great action sequences for the viewing audience. Again, very fun film, and I highly recommend it for if you're able to separate what came before. It's just one of those. It's a throwback to the great action films that I grew up watching in the 80s and the 90s, while still maintaining that great Terminator mythology. Again, great action sequences, great action, memorable performances from Arnold Schwarzenegger, Christina Loken, and just manages to really create an even more interesting, prominent story that I think didn't necessarily get a fair shake until much later on down the road. But I recommend it. Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Watch it whenever you're in the mood. I feel that it's very interesting to watch it. Watch them all. Well, watch the first three in sequence just to see how you feel about it much later on. Recommend it. I do give it a 5 out of 5 if you're able to separate what came before. And the next review, I'm not sure what it'll be, but either way, continue to be on the lookout for it, my friends. Be safe, stay healthy, and see you later. Peace out.